Rockna, ir-rock tagħna l-Maltin.
The future, the present is often the past. In the aftermath, you're waiting on your final chance. And I suppress my laugh, cause once you cross the tracks, you don't come back. In the aftermath, in the aftermath, in the aftermath. I know it, I know that you know that, I know it. I know that you bleed when I show it. And you want me to just control it, girl. I just can't help myself. I know that you know that, I know it. I know that you bleed when I show it. And you want me to just control it, but I just can't help. I know that you know that, I know it. I know that you bleed when I show it, girl. And you want me to just control it, but I just can't help myself. I know that you know that, I know it. I know that you bleed when I show it, girl. And you want me to just control it, but I just can't help. Oh, yeah. I know that you know that, I know it. I know that you bleed when I show it, girl. And you want me to just control it, but I just can't help myself. I know that you know that, I know it. I know that you bleed when I show it, girl. And you want me to just control it, but I just can't help. I just can't help it. I just can't help. I just can't help it. I just can't help. Can't help it. I just can't calm myself down.
Jisima Aftermath dik is-silta li permezz tagħha qegħdin nagħtu bidu għat-tieni parti tal-programm Rockna tal-lejla hawnhekk fuq Net FM miegħi fl-istudio għandi kantawtur Amerikan li għal numru ta' xhur issa ibbaża ruħu fil-Gżejjer Maltin. Miegħi fil-fatt fl-istudio għandi lil Kurt Reifler u minn hawn il-qudiem se nkunu qed nitkellmu bl-Ingliż naturalment biex inkomplu din l-intervista. First of all, Kurt, welcome to the show. Welcome to Net FM.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here, Mike.
And to the show Rockna, which basically focuses on the Maltese music scene, as we were talking earlier. But obviously, for this segment of the show, we'll be talking about you and your music, part of which we just heard, and that's also part of an EP we'll be talking about a bit later on in this interview. But first of all, for the benefit of our listeners, a bit of an intro about yourself, who you are, and what turned you on to music, first of all.
Sure. Well, first of all, I guess we're doing this in English, right? My
Yeah,
Maltese
sure.
is rudimentary at best. Yeah, so my name is Kurt Reifler. I'm a crazy, traveling, weirdo American guy. I lived in many different places, and Malta's become, one of my home bases. I've sort of fallen in love with the country here, and originally it was sort of business reasons that brought me here. And then I started digging around and found people like yourself and found that there's a nice music community. So, I guess I consider myself sort of a global entrepreneur and musician, and, that's it's hard to say it in one paragraph, but that's what I got for you.
and what first turned you on to music earlier on in life?
Sure. Well, I grew up with a lot of rock and roll. My dad's a guitar player, and actually he makes an appearance on a song called "Carry On" that's actually on this EP. So that was kind of a treat for me to be able to have him do sort of a guest appearance on a track. But it was always very important to him, classic rock and American rock and roll, and that's sort of when he grew up, a child of the 60s, and a lot of that wore off on me. And then I got into funk and jazz when I was in high school, playing drums in jazz bands, and sort of went that nerdy musician route. And, so it's just always been a huge part of my life. So.
And what was the first instrument you picked up? Was it the guitar because your father was a guitarist?
It was actually drums because my father...
needed a drummer.
Yeah, basically. I mean, he had a dad band, so it was my dad and some other... middle-aged guys at the time, and they needed a drum set in the house because they were practicing in our house. So it was just easier to get a sort of stripped-down kit, which he did. And if you put drums in the attic and you have a kid 6 or 7 years old, they're going to start playing them. So that's what I did. I just started tinkering around, and then within a couple years, drummers, as they tend to do, stopped showing up, or they wouldn't show up for the Wednesday rehearsal. So then I would sit in. And then
eventually,
before you knew it, I was accidentally a drummer playing with,
a dad band.
Guys that were much older and much better than I was, when I was 10 and 12 years old. So that was sort of how I got started. It was accidental but fortunate.
And did you decide then, after learning the drums, that you wanted to learn more instruments, or maybe even sing, because you also sing, obviously?
It was just some kind of a mix-up, Mike. It wasn't purposeful. I actually never played a chord. I mean, not even a power chord or anything until I was, I think, 19 years old. And even that was just because I was living with a guy who had a guitar, and I just started to tinker around. For whatever reason, I was never particularly interested in the guitar, and never saw myself as a songwriter. I think I tried to sing one time at a band practice in high school, and it was sort of a joke. It didn't go well. I didn't know what to do. I was nervous, and I just sort of put all of that away. I didn't think about songwriting. I didn't think about singing. I never touched a guitar. And then once I did, which was, much later than most people, it just sort of infected me, and I caught the bug, and then I felt like I had to make up for a lot of lost time. And it was only a couple of years after that I put out my first record, which was a self-titled album in 2007. I didn't own a guitar at the time. I didn't own an electric guitar, so I borrowed a friend's to make the record. The whole thing was backwards, but it worked out somehow. So.
And was that the music on that album, is that linked somehow to the style of music there is on the EP that you're going to be releasing?
I would say so.
Or was it more organic, perhaps?
That was probably more of a singer-songwriter feeling to it. Still on the heavier side, but I think I saw myself more as a songwriter as opposed to a rock and roll musician. And it's hard for me to say exactly what the difference is. But now I feel more, I think at that time I was trying to reject the drums on some level and bring in more lyrics and more guitar and songwriting, which on the one hand was good. I think with this new record, this new double EP, it's sort of a return to the drums. And, that's what I've been playing my whole life. That's probably what I do the best, or at least what I feel the most comfortable with. It would be a better way to say it. So I think I'm sort of coming back to that.
And when you started playing, let's say you had your own thing, writing your own songs, and you decided you want to release this album, eventually you thought of going further with it, because that was kind of all you. But did you get then the itch to get a band together as well?
I did. It's been quite a process how it all worked out. As I said, I never saw myself as a guitar player. Honestly, I still don't really see myself that way. I see myself as someone who can play the guitar and can write songs on it, but I don't see myself as someone who does that specifically. When I was putting bands together, I always felt like I really needed to do it with people that I was comfortable with. So it was always a little bit casual. It was friends that I would bring on tour. Dylan Stoddard, who I want to give a big shout out to, he's a co-producer of the record. He's one of my trusted allies and bandmates for a long time, which is why he was involved in this record. I used to tour with his brother, Justin Stoddard, whose nickname was Kill, and that was in a two-piece group. So I always it was sort of who was around me and who I felt comfortable with. So it was always pieced together, but it's been great.
So when you said earlier you're a traveler.
Mm-hmm.
So when you actually travel around different countries, is the music scene in each country something you always try to tap into, or it just depends on maybe how long you're going to be there for, if it's worth tapping into or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. This EP is actually my first recording since 2011. So, I had retired from music. That was my claim. I said rock and roll was a young man's game and that I was going to retire at 30. And I did that. And then through some sort of a mix-up, I found myself back in the mix. So the answer is, for a long time, I wasn't a concern of mine. And I was really focused on other things that I was doing, other business pursuits. And then about 3 to 4 years ago, just a lot of things were changing. A friend of mine was sick. This record is actually a loose tribute to him. I had a new business. I just moved to Germany, and there was just a shift, and I felt that it was time to get back to some of the things that I knew, that I felt comfortable with: music, drumming, and reconnecting with people that I hadn't necessarily lost touch with, but people that I wasn't in touch with enough as I was going through my travels. So.
And you felt that through music you could actually rekindle those contacts, those connections? I
did, to some extent. I did. It's music has always been one of my good friends. Maybe that's corny, but I have always felt like that. The drums, when no one else was around after school, those were always around. And then later in life, the guitar and songwriting. So by reacquainting myself with that and that sort of friendship and relationship that I had with music, I found that a similar thing happened with some other relationships that I had. So I felt much more comfortable to get back into it, actually.
Right. So we're going to take a short break here from talking and go to another track of your EP, which
Yes.
we'll be talking about in more detail after we listen to this song. There's a track called Hurricane.
You'll never take my time. You're never gonna make my mind up. Unless there's something real that you need me to hear. On and on we go again. You're just a hurricane, hurricane, hurricane.
Is-silta bl-isem ta' Hurricane hemmhekk silta oħra mela mill-EP li se nkun qed nitkellmu aktar dwaru ma' Kurt Reifler propju matul din l-intervista. Back to you, Kurt. That song is another one lifted off the EP by the name of Year Of. It's part one of two EPs that collectively will be called Year of the Bear.
Correct.
And the first part, the first EP of the two, is about to be released later on this month.
Yeah,
a few days to go, actually.
November 9th, actually. So yeah, it's a bit of a sort of a sad concept on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm very proud of it. It's a bit uplifting. A dear friend of mine passed away 2 years ago, almost to the day. So November 9th is the closest release date to his the anniversary of his passing. And also the following year, we'll be releasing the second half, which is entitled The Bear. That was his nickname, The Bear. So this is a project that was done with him in mind. During the process of making the record is when he received his diagnosis. He had an illness that was very, very deadly and very swift, and he and I knew that during his last year, and it just seemed like an appropriate title. The record is not about him per se, but it's just made with sort of a tone and a mood and sort of an awareness. That was a big...
in its own way, it's a kind of tribute to your friend as well.
It is. It's a loose tribute. The topic is not about him, but in a way it is. The recording was made during this time, which, of course, was a very dark time for both of us. On the other hand, there was a real beauty to this awareness that we both had of what was happening, and you're really sort of able to break into some real things with someone when you have a timeline. And I think a lot of us aren't aware of that. We just go around and we feel like,
sometimes we take things too much for granted, I suppose.
I think so.
Like we put off things that we could do today, we put them off till tomorrow or the day after that. Sometimes you end up maybe forgetting totally about them. And the reality of something like this actually shakes you up and tells you to wake up and actually do things and live the moment, I suppose.
Yeah, it's very impactful, and it's impactful, of course, to the people that are around someone in that position. But I have to say that his attitude was always the best, which is incredible to me and always will be. No one's unaffected by something like that, but it was affecting other people in a more negative way, or at least that was the face that he kept throughout that whole process, which was very hard to believe and still is. And he was actually just a helpful and incredible friend during that time, focused as usual more on other people, including myself, seemingly, than he was on himself, even though he had every reason to focus on himself.
Yeah.
So.
And the decision to release the two EPs instead of just going for the one, let's say, full album.
Yeah.
What brought that on?
It just felt right for some reason. Of course, I considered just releasing all the songs as one sort of standard 10, 11, 12 song project, but there was something about it that just felt a little more impactful. It felt like a longer journey. The project has been simmering for a while with Dylan, the co-producer, and myself. And there was just something about it that it felt like it had to be a little bigger than that, a little bit more drawn out. There's a temporary nature to a lot of projects where something just comes out, you talk about it a few times in an article here and there, and I didn't want this one to fade away. And I don't mean from a publicity standpoint, but even for myself, I liked the idea that this was going to be sort of an era as opposed to an event.
Right, so it gives you a bit of a prolonged schedule, so to speak, rather than just work on this one whole record and put it out, and then you have to move on to the next thing. You just split it in two, so it would really be kind of, there's a year in between as well. There was 1 year, that was the year with your friend, and then there's another year now in between the two releases as well. So
it does have yeah, it's hard to explain exactly why that felt right, but it did. I was very conscious of that. I didn't want this to be an event. You know, I wanted this to be sort of something that I was able to reflect on during the process and also after. So.
And what about style-wise? I know we heard Aftermath earlier and Hurricane just a few minutes ago, and we'll be hearing the single of this EP as well to round off the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Style-wise, there's quite a few elements at play here. You don't really stick on the one track. You like to involve other elements.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the songwriting comes from just rhythms and just playing drums for a long time. I also want to give a big shout out to Dylan Stoddard, the co-producer and multi-instrumentalist on the record. And, he's a bassist mainly, but also plays other things throughout the recording. And his style brought elements of funk and just different grooves that really added a texture to it. And I think that collaboration was really, really influential in the sound that we came up with. Whereas the first recording, going back to one of your earlier questions, the first recording was very rock-oriented, and then in 2011, another sort of rock-oriented two-piece record. And this one is still, I think, fits in the same vein, but has some different elements. And I think a large part of that is his playing and sort of influence over it.
And if we had to go through the tracks there, would you say that they pretty much define where you like to be musically as well, within your own style? I know you mentioned the bass player and the producer in this case, who was influential in the whole result as well. But would you say personally you would have gone also somewhere along the same way?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm conscious on each recording, and this one included, to try to have a range, a few songs that might fit into sort of a songwriter genre, a few songs that'll wake you up, that if you hear them, you sort of, you get a little bit motivated. You can't help but kind of get out of your seat when you hear them. At least that's the goal. So I tried to just cover the spectrum, I think just like a set, if you're performing a live set, you want to have an arc, and, you want to bring people on a journey. So that's sort of my goal with the whole project, but even with each individual EP as well, to sort of start up, do a little bit of a dip, and then come back up again. That seems to be a tried and true formula that I've always found to work. So.
Right, so we're ending near the end of the interview, because time flies, really. And I wanted to ask about the plans for yourself and this EP. Are there plans to tour with the band, and are there plans maybe to have your band come over to Malta?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are. So I'm fortunate to know some really, really great players. I'll take this opportunity to give Nick Goldring a shout out as well. He's one of my trusted allies and bandmates, and also a great videographer and photojournalist. So he and I have worked on some different video projects, relating to the record, and he's been someone that I've toured with on and off over the years. So to answer you, I intend to do a few different things, and one is play band shows, full band shows in a trio format, and I think I'll also play some solo shows as well. I enjoy those. It's a completely different thing to me. Even though the songs in some cases are the same, it's really just a whole different experience. And I do intend to play in Malta and do a European tour in the new year, most likely starting in the spring. So I look forward to that. I hope that people, yeah. I hope Malta responds to me as well as well as I have responded to it. So that's my hope.
And for those listeners out there who want to keep up with what you're up to, and even eventually get to listen to the EP once it's released, where should they look?
They could just go to my website. It's kurtreifler.com. So that's KurtReif like Frank, LER.com. And that will bring you to all of the social medias, and we have new videos every week or two, and that's the best way to keep up.
Cool. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the song we're going to end this interview with is actually the lead single of the EP, to promote the EP as well. Yeah,
we put this video out a couple weeks ago, actually, sort of as a little taste of the record. And this is something that Nick and I had recorded together, done the video together, and it's a song that it's a fun one. I just think that it's fun, and it sort of has that feel of a single. Sometimes you just know, like, oh, this song is going to be, that's the single. You just know.
Obviously, aiming for radio airplay as well, so hopefully we'll get to hear the song more often on the local airways as well.
I hope you hear it as often as possible.
Great. So, Kurt, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
I wish you luck with the EP, obviously, and we'll be keeping in touch also to follow up with the release, and eventually, hopefully, as well, the band playing in Malta and yourself giving gigs around the island as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks. Ħana l-umela din it-tieni parti tal-programm propju b'din is-single li għadna kif tkellimna dwarha jisimha Stay Above, mbagħad wara immorru għat-tielet parti tal-programm tal-lejla.
Lord, forgive me for my doormat appearance. Just been so long since I've been walked on. I pounced at the chance to feel it. It seems your recipe has got the best of me. And I'll make sure I'm not the only one bleeding. So fly, bitch, fly. 'Cause God or somebody give you wings. Bitch, fly. Never coming down, stay above. Anger, the manifestation of events that are blamed on a specific person. Pain is the result of anger, used as a tool to alert your receptors. Confusion is the absence of pain, and failure is a construct governed by the insane. If women are a drug, drugs are a mask, and I don't even have to ask. Yeah. So fly, bitch, fly. 'Cause God or somebody gave you wings. Bitch, fly. Never coming down, stay above. Bitch, fly. 'Cause God or somebody gave you wings. Bitch, fly. You're never coming down, stay above. You ever fall to earth, I hoist you back up. You're never coming down, stay above. You ever fall to earth, I hoist you back up. You're never coming down, stay above. You ever fall to earth, I hoist you back up. You're never coming down, stay above. You ever fall to earth, I hoist you back up. So fly, bitch, fly. 'Cause God or somebody gave you wings. Bitch, fly. Never coming down, stay above. So fly, bitch, fly. 'Cause God or somebody gave you wings. Bitch, fly. Never coming down, stay above.